But I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, me too. It's gonna be a pleasure to kind of hone my public speaking skills a little bit as well.
I thought your public speaking skills were quite good. We just did the AMA with Gotchi recently, and that was good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, thanks. Like I said, that was like my first time really addressing not an audience within YGG, so uh, oh, always good to hear good feedback there, and that I wasn't just rambling on.
No, it was good. It was a very productive conversation. And I'm really looking forward to today and getting into some of the guild related things that, you've been doing as YGG, and just do a deep dive into kind of how these guilds are operating and what their plans are for the Gotchiverse. So those are going to be some really cool things to get into. But maybe while we're waiting here, I think it'd be good to maybe get some of your background. Like, have you been with YGG from the start, or how long you've been involved with YGG?
Yeah, so like I started actually in the crypto space like early 2017, kind of during that other kind of run up and then big peak down. It was just in and out of the space there, kind of finding things, and then I stumbled across Axie Infinity late 2019, um, like after October there. I had actually been talking to Jihu, who is the head of their growth department there, and I was actually going to be working for them doing some community building stuff, but they weren't really at the same scaling level as they are now. Um, and he had actually pointed me towards Gabby, who is one of the founders of YGG. And me and Gabby just got to talking there, and I really liked the idea and the vision that they had for YGG. Um, and just kind of joined their Discord as a community member and helped them just grow their community side of things just personally. Like there was no monetary gain or anything there. And this is all before like we had a white paper, back when the Discord was, below 1,000 people. Um, so I was kind of on that front there, joined it, loved it. And then, a couple months later when we were actually doing hiring rounds or whatnot, they asked me if I wanted to come on part-time until they could figure out exactly where to put me. And now in the past few months, I've come on as their game operations manager to really help with asset deployment and kind of how we manage our gaming community specifically.
Well, that's quite the journey from like where you started to like getting this big role that's like responsible for all these things.
Yeah, it's really like that's I think one of the best things about Web3 here is you can join as a community member in a lot of these projects, and if you're really involved and the project has good leads that are willing to promote or at least acknowledge the hard work that the community members are doing essentially for free, like that's the best part.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of, and I was talking to this with this, I was talking about this with McCallum the other day about how a lot of the work that we're doing in Web3 is like you're doing the work first, and if your product or you're giving enough value, you're gonna get rewarded for that later. It's kind of like you have to put the work in. Sometimes you have to create a reputation or what have you, and then the rewards are reaped like way down the line. If the project was successful or the whatever guild was successful.
Yeah, exactly. It's very similar to like how we have internships or whatever for normal jobs or whatnot. Um, but again, it's a little bit different in that with Web3 because there are so many other avenues where you could actually reward and I'm putting this in like quotations, an intern there.
Yeah, 100%. Um, I kind of see that with the Avagachi Ambassador program that they have right now. I'm a part of it, so it is similar in that sense, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. It's we don't necessarily have something to reward you with right now, like monetarily, and It's the same for us here at YGG, but we can give other incentives that are of value to you as a community member. Whether that's, some higher speaking roles or, more one-on-ones with the devs or whatnot like that, to somebody who's ingrained in the community is, worth quite a lot of money in value, right?
Yeah, exactly. I 100% hear you on that. It's kind of like, if I was to bring up another Avogotchi example, in our ambassador program, the compensation, there is some compensation for the work that we do. But there was this conversation we had to have about like, what would be the better reward? It's like, do you guys want to get more actual dollar value reward, or do you want the XP for your Avogotchis? And overwhelmingly, a lot of people who were invested in Avogotchis saw the XP value as a higher value thing than the actual dollar value. And so, that's one way that we get rewarded is actually in XP for our Avogotchis. So they get leveled up, and the level of your Avogotchi, we just found out recently, will dictate how many kind of guilds you can participate in. So that's another interesting kind of facet to how people can get rewarded in this space. It doesn't necessarily, like you said, have to be a dollar value.
Exactly, yeah, and that's really exciting because, like, I come from a long line of playing for like MMORPGs like RuneScape, World of Warcraft, right, where guilds were like very common. Like that was just, you needed a guild if you wanted to raid. There was no way around it. The problem with that is there was really no way to reward guild members than, other than just giving them certain things within the game. It's not like, I could cash out or send somebody $50 in World of Warcraft because they helped lead raid or something, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I'm so glad you're a fellow RuneScape player. I've been an old school RuneScape player since I was like 15, so I've been playing for quite a long time. Um, and I still, I'll jump on my account every now and then and uh, go mine some ore or something. Like I'm pretty much a farmer in that game. So, it's kind of therapeutic maybe in some sense even. But adding actual dollar value to that could take that to a whole new level.
well, exactly. Like this is what I've never really understood. Like these game economies are very well flushed out, and they're quite intricate if you start breaking them down, just like the normal economy, right? Like people are providing values. Auction houses again go up and down based on the value that people are willing to pay, just like a traditional stock market or a commodities market, right? So it's like we're spending our time, we're doing this to create resources just like we would be doing in the real world, but there's no monetary gain from it, right? It's like always that sentiment of my parents that were, you're never going to make money playing video games unless you're like a pro streamer or something crazy like that, right? And this is kind of flipping that narrative on its head.
Yeah, it really is just another kind of it's a virtual version of a real economy. And there's going to be some real things to take into account as far as like tokenomics goes, probably to reward people in like a fair way. I mean, with that being said, maybe we can kind of get started with this whole thing. The whole reason why you're here as a member of YGG, community member, a community leader. Actually, what's your specific title? That's a good question too.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a game ops manager, which sits
Okay.
within their core team there, right? So I'm not technically like just a community member more anymore. Like I'm an actual, full-time employee in the sense of YGG here. Um, and then we have many different departments or whatnot that deal with various tasks that I'm sure we'll dive into as we get deeper into the functions of YGG and whatnot.
Yeah, 100%. So maybe a good place to start. I mean, so YGG is like an OG play to earn.
Always fun.
My Yeah, my apologies. My apologies for that there. It it tends to happen. When I first started doing these gotchi spaces, I used to panic when this would happen, and it was like horrible. But now I've accepted it as the way, it's like how things just are sometimes, and you just restart it. So If this does happen again, I'll just restart the space and, people can jump back in.
Yeah, whatever works. Like, I'm not sure if you guys have access to like the voice channels in Gotchi either, right? Like, I can always hop in there.
Actually, that's a good point. I mean, I wish I did. That would be a great option, but unfortunately, we that would be a better option, but we don't have access to that. Not yet, anyways. I gotta get a community lead role like you, and then maybe I can get some access to that.
Yeah, it's one of the things we've been kind of struggling with as well for YGG is like, how do you separate your kind of like, official post stuff from your community stuff? Because we have a lot of community people like yourself that want to, stream and have their own spaces. Um, but with our pipeline of all the news or whatnot that we have for YGG, how how do you space in the community stuff? And the only real way I see that is having, two separate kind of things running, and then people get to choose whatever one they want to tune into.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like we're gonna deal with that with Avagachi pretty soon, with so many different things going on. Um, yeah. So I think I'd left off before all that stuff happened. I'd left off at maybe we can get a scale of what YGG has achieved so far. Maybe let's say over the last year or so, because I know you have an extensive scholarship program that's spread across many different games. So maybe we could just get like some high level stats on like your player count or the level of participation in these games, I guess.
Yeah, cool. I think you had actually asked me originally like exactly what my goal is here in YGG, or my role, I should say. So that's Game Operations Manager. So I fall under the game operations team, right? We have a few different teams. So we have a partnerships team, we have an investment team, portfolio teams, all kinds of different stuff for different roles that need to be taken care of, right? There. So again, my main purpose is once we've made a partnership or investments and we get assets sent to one of the YGG wallets there, my job is to figure out then how do we effectively, have some sort of blending structure or scholarship structure to get these assets out to our community, and what's the most, effective way, what groups are we targeting out the gate, and then this is broken down into different structures based on where that invested game or partnership is, because a lot of these games don't have gameplay, they're in the works, and they only have like staking or something, right? And then some games come out and they have no lending structure at all. So it's fun to try and figure out different solutions based on where these games are at in kind of their development cycle.
Yeah, I guess on that point, a lot of these games are in development, including Avagachi. I think maybe one of the games I do know of that YGG is heavily involved in would be Axie Infinity, and I know you guys have like a whole bunch of like a ridiculous amount of players that are scholars in Axie Infinity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
huge number there. So I'll give you some high level stats here. We have 98,000 Discord members, just over now, so we're almost at our 100K cap. We have over 20,000 Axie scholars or scholarships, so that's 20,000 people that are effectively using YGG's assets to play Axie and earn. We also have our YGG badge, which you can mint, which is one of our kind of like gating ways of verification. And we have 18,000 of those minted, so 18,000 people have minted our badge. 172,000 people following on Twitter. So quite big numbers there for only really being out for about a year so far.
Those are some insane numbers, like incredible numbers. I mean, even 172,000 Twitter followers. So you guys are very well known in this space, and I feel like it goes back to my other point about how you guys have been around for, you're a well-established guild, and I feel like a lot of other people who are trying to establish, their own like smaller like organic guilds within these games can maybe learn from some of the things that you guys have been implementing as well. I really like this idea of a token membership. And can you maybe touch on the token membership and what kind of things did it mitigate, and how was it kind of beneficial to the guild to implement that?
So like the badge token there, or the actual YGG governance token? Because we have two, right? So we have an NFT
Yeah.
called our YGG badge, which is kind of more, I would say, towards the membership kind of thing. And then we actually have a governance token for all of our activities there.
Right. So the governance token I was actually going to get to a little bit later, but I definitely want to hear about the membership aspect of the one for one kind of badge.
Okay, yeah. So the badge is more of our broad range thing. Unfortunately, we launched it on Ethereum. Would have much rather have done it on Polygon just to negate kind of the gas fees there, which is kind of our biggest issue right now. A lot of our players, the gas fees, right? $20 in the Philippines is quite a lot. So I don't blame them for not wanting to shield that out there. But that's kind of our vetting process, or future, that will serve as like a future, like you said, membership card essentially into other activities or aspects of our future of work program. Eventually that's coming out, and other key points for the roadmap there.
That's really cool. I mean, is the future of work program something you could touch on, or is that still kind of under wraps?
So I can't go into any heavy details, but it is in
Yeah.
our roadmap. I'm not sure if you've seen that there, but like YGG kind of operates on like a hybrid between a DAO. Even out the gate, we didn't say we were going to be a full-on DAO, just because, DAOs are really great, but they tend to have the same issues that big government has, which is, it's very hard to execute things in a timely manner. And for certain things like vetting games or whatnot there, and in having that, the traditional structure of like a company works just a little bit better in the beginning until the framework is kind of set out there.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Once things are kind of solidified and there's actually a community structure maybe around that, and maybe you have some community leaders and mentors and all these things that we need for some of these games that have quite a bit of depth as well, I find I think that would probably be, you're right, like, that would probably be a time to maybe consider more decentralization and all that. But I kind of like how you actually touched on the centralized aspect as not being like a bad thing at the start. And I actually agree with that.
Yeah, we've seen it time and time again, where certain like things try to start out just as a DAO, and there's no shepherding of the community there, and it becomes a battle between multiple different ideas, versus having a little bit of centralization in the beginning allows us to focus that idea, lay the foundation to make sure none of these issues are going to come up, because again, this has never been done, so there's not like a roadmap of what autonomous protocols we need to effectively be able to execute any of these things. Like, we're essentially the ones coming up with it, so to just like hit the ground running there, I think could end up very poorly, right? Like, there's obviously very good examples of DAOs just being able to work out the gate, but I think also there, like, the scope and the time frame also changes in how active they can move and how many different things they can actively vote on.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. So, with that being said, I want to touch on a point that you made earlier about, RuneScape, and you used to be a RuneScape player and you kind of understand how guilds used to play a role back then. And I feel, personally, from my take on it, guilds in those sorts of games were a place where you shared kind of common social interests, and you could, get together and then execute things in the game as a group, which you otherwise maybe wouldn't be able to do. I think at the core level, maybe that's what a guild is supposed to do. But now in play to earn, you have this other aspect where you have an economic interest for all the players to participate. Um, what are the primary things that you might see a gaming guild doing in a Web3 play to earn game? Like how is their approach maybe different with this guild structure compared to, like the Web2 kind of guilds that we know of?
I kind of see it like half and half because again, a lot of the things that we're doing now, we're already done within guilds like RuneScape, right? Like if you had a large enough guild and you had certain skilled people, crafting things, or you had different people doing raids, like you would still divvy up the share to other guild members that maybe are doing a different, like specific task, right? Like some people specialize into fishing and all of these other things that maybe somebody that's a heavy raid player, I don't want to take the time to fish, but I need fish to craft all my potions or whatnot for those raids, right? Um, so guilds have already been kind of shuffling what they're allowed to do within Web 2 games. The big difference for Web 3 now is that time, that money can actually flow outside of that game into your real life if you need it, or it can stay and progress your progress in the game itself. And that's the big difference, is the fact that now the gate where you could, if you wanted to trade RuneScape stuff, you would have to break their terms of services, go onto one of these sketchy sites, and then sell your things to somebody else, and hope that process goes smoothly. So you're trusting a bunch of third parties. With Web3 and blockchain, that kind of, you're eliminating a lot of the other middlemen in there to kind of make a trustless system where this can happen flawlessly for real world money, not just in-game stuff.
Yeah, I think that trustless real world money for me is a big deal because previously, like you said, in games like RuneScape or World of Warcraft or whatever, there were ways in which you could maybe monetize some of this stuff, but you'd essentially be breaking terms of service, and you'd have to go through multiple things where you would have to do these trustless transactions, but you didn't actually have that protection that you do with like this system in Web3, where it truly is trustless but also secure. So you're able to actually create real world value with other people, which I think is really, really cool. Because like we kind of have this experience from our previous gaming experience, and now we're just kind of like monetizing it essentially.
Exactly, and I think that's why this speaks to so many people and why they, harken back to like the Ready Player One, fantasy there of everybody's in the metaverse and, we play and we earn all within the metaverse. I'm a little bit held back on that idea. I think both can go hand in hand. I'm not that crazy dystopian to think, the real world's going to go to crap and everybody's just going to want to live in the metaverse. I'd like to think there's going to be both and there'll be benefits to having both, um, in that kind of regard there.
Yeah, it's like it's also adding more depth to maybe your experience while you're gaming. Like, like there's some real world consequences for maybe not managing your lands properly or like not defending your structures properly.
Yeah, who knows how far people are willing to take it, right? Like, again, I've know people are trying to like NFT tokenize land now. And imagine, like a game actually uses that tokenized land for something. Like you're saying, like that could be crazy.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how things kind of unfold. Your scholarship program to me is really interesting because it's been scaled to such a large degree. I know in Axie Infinity, they they don't have like an infrastructure for renting as far as I know. So how did YG approach that? How did they approach this being able to rent a team of Axies out to a bunch of players? And what were some of the maybe the challenges you guys experienced at this?
Yeah, so in the beginning, renting was kind of something that the community made for Axie, just because they realized that there was, obviously people that wanted to rent because they couldn't afford the Axies themselves. and then the fact that a lot of these assets were just sitting in their wallets in the first place there. So what they started to do was create scripts or bots that would be able to essentially automate this into big spreadsheets or whatnot, and then divvy out the assets. It's one of the key things actually YGG looks for now when we're looking into making an investment in a game, is if they have plans to, release some sort of dashboard which would mitigate us having to make all these bots and then, figure out how each individual game affects the bot and, what metrics there are, so that we still keep, the seed phrases for the assets, but the players can still use them, right? Like, that gets really tricky. And when you're at our scale and somebody can run off with the assets, that would not be good for any of our community members as well.
Yes, yeah, I wonder about that security aspect because, I think these things are, expensive. Like they're not easy to purchase, especially if you're living in the Philippines or a country where, that could be someone's wage for like many months to buy that. So like there's a lot on the line. So were these bots and systems that people had initially created, were they like fairly secure? Was that the reason you were allowed to were able to scale to like 20,000 players?
We had those bots, but Axie in itself, like with their login system and everything they had there, they had like the way it worked is you linked an email to get account access to your wallet. So you could give that email and password to one of your scholars and they could log in, but they would not be able to like actually move the assets itself because they don't have, they wouldn't have access to that. So they could play, right? They can play, they can do everything, but they wouldn't be able to do any of the on-chain stuff through that. So that's how we kind of bypass that, right? We would just have this bot create a email and a login essentially, and then give those to the scholars. And that was that. And again, it's very trustful of us, right? Because essentially they're trusting us that after, X amount of time playing that we're going to pay them out, right? Because essentially all the SLP is coming to our wallet because we have control of it. And then we send it to one of their other wallets that they have control of.
Okay. So it's like there's some coordination that has to happen there, but it's actually kind of half and half, like you said. It's some of it's managed by created for the Axies themselves, and then the other part of it is you guys managing the actual rentals, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we have managers that kind of manage different like groups of scholars. So it's not all just on us. So it's very community driven in that regards there that, some of our scholars have gone on to be managers now where they're, managing scholars for us. We're still the ones loaning out the assets, but they're the ones kind of managing and watching that strategically, handling payouts, giving out the scholarships and so on, handling any issues that the scholar has.
Yeah, see, I find that interesting because one of the things I've been considering with Gotchi is when we have new players join that maybe are not new to gaming, but new to Web3 and crypto, maybe I'm wondering how does a guild take that player and maybe train them and help them get onboarded into the Web3 and crypto side of things? So like with your scholarship program, is there a way that these scholarship managers are able to like train these new players to not only get better at the game to earn more yield, but also to help them kind of get more into like the crypto and Web3 space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of these programs, like, again, it's very daunting for somebody, like you said, to, put up a month's worth of rent for a system that they don't know, right? If they've never, even hopped onto Web3. It's a lot easier for them to fill out a form, like hop in our Discord, fill out a form, and then say, okay, here's your login and whatever. You can play the game, you'll be earning, and then when you're ready for your payout, we will help you walk through, wallet setup or whatever else there needs to be. Because again, there's lots of great videos and resources. We just need to, show them which ones are legitimate and push that towards them. But we also do like we have an Axie boot camp, which is essentially managers, some of our Axie managers coming on to like essentially run a stream, teaching people, metas, some of the strategies to win and get higher in the MMR bracket, which means you earn more as well. So there is a huge education portion towards that, and I think that's the biggest thing is we're taking a lot of the risk out for them out the gate, because again, you'd have to spend $300 to get a team for Axie, and then you'd still have to navigate setting up your wallet and all of this yourself, and then adding that currency to your wallet, and then going on to now buy those Axies, and now the fact that Axie has moved from Ethereum to Ronin, which is a separate blockchain, right? Like it's very confusing for somebody that just heard, okay, I hear this is a video game that you can earn by playing. How do I get to playing and earning as quick as possible, right?
That seems to be like the largest group of people, in my opinion. Are these people who are like, I've heard about this game, I can make some X amount of money, and I'm also like good at playing games, or I like playing games. That's like a huge demographic, and they're going to need to get past some of these barriers somehow. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these games approach that. Like with Avagachi, for example, I think this rental, on-chain rent, and I want to know what you think about it too, but I think the ability to rent things on-chain is going to make it very easy for people to trustlessly hand out their Avagachis to rent. Like for example, I have some siblings and I have some friends who are really interested in Avagachi, but they've been put off by the price of an Avagachi. And so my kind of value proposition to them is I have a whole bunch of them that I won't be able to play at the same time. But hey, you know what? Take this thing out for a spin for a weekend. See how much Alchemica you collect. You can keep it all. But I really just want this person to try out the game. And I think once you're actually there at that point, you're willing to put in that investment to learn all that other stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very similar to kind of the approach that we do here at YGG, right? It's like we don't want people to play games that aren't fun. And I think in the space right now, there's this big emphasis on earning but not fun. And I think that's very counterintuitive of what games are supposed to be, right? They're meant to be fun. They're not meant to be work. Nobody wants to play a game that's just grind and you don't actually enjoy it. That makes no sense. So I think that's the best way is like having these systems. So we buy the assets, or like in your case, you have extra gotchis that, like you said, you were not going to use. What does it hurt to, loan these out to people, see the earning potential and see if they enjoy the game? And maybe they stay, maybe they don't. And if not, then, rinse and repeat. There's always going to be people that want to try but don't have the money or don't want to shell out the money. And this allows them to essentially do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest thing I'm kind of looking forward to. I think that's going to be a big moment for people to get exposure to these things that they've been reluctant to dip their toe in the water, because it's just they don't know what's below the surface until they're actually in the experience. So it's a challenging thing to approach, but I think the on-chain rentals.
Oh, will be huge. Do we just get rugged again?
And this guy loves to make it dramatic, doesn't he? It's weird how the infrastructure can crumble, because obviously you and I are just fine, but apparently he dies and then we die slowly behind him.
Yeah, it's like they go specifically after the host every time.
So I'm back. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can.
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay.
I can hear you now. Yeah, you're good. You're back.
Okay, that's awesome. Sometimes I feel like, I don't know if you've ever watched that movie Interstellar, where he's like behind the bookcase trying to talk to like the earlier version of himself. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but that's exactly how I feel when this Twitter stuff happens.
Yeah, it looks like it's specifically targeting you because you're the host.
Yeah, and it's weird because it always happens when I'm hosting a special event, because I do these every Sunday as well.
Mhm.
And we've never had a problem on a Sunday, but it's like if I decide to do it on a Thursday, good luck.
Yep.
But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, sorry, I think I can't remember where we left off. I think we were talking about Web3 and crypto and people getting onboarded.
Yeah, and then the whole lending structure, being excited for Gotchi lending there.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really looking forward to Gotchi lending, and I think that's really going to allow people to just take these things for a test drive and just see what 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 it is we're really excited about. You know, um,
Exactly, and that's really what YGG is at the core. Its core is we get these assets, and we know that not every scholar is going to want to stay a scholar forever. We know people are going to want to hop into different games. Certain things get stale, or whatnot. Who are we to like say, hey, this is a job, you need to stay with this specific game? Um, that's not the case, right? Uh, and for us, if we're going to get these assets, we don't want them sitting there and doing nothing, because that does us no good either. Like, we could have just invested in their governance token or something like that, right? And made our money back there as just simply an investor into the game. But that's not our purpose here. Like, our job when we invest into one of these games or partner is to help them grow their player base and their ecosystem, if we can help contribute that based on our knowledge from other games and what's worked within the industry.
yeah, that's a great point on mentorships and partnerships because I think that's the big difference between like what you guys are doing as Yield Guild and like, for example, what an investment firm will be doing that's investing in a play to earn space. They're not going to be maybe diving as deep into like the mechanics of the game, the rental system, and like creating scholarship programs, pairing them with people, getting some sort of a mentorship happening in the community. That's a lot more involvement than typically how a VC would come into it.
Exactly. And it's weird because some of these things, like, we'll actually take a loss in the first bit while we get things set up by just we don't take revenue in certain things. So I know we've set up a few like testing programs for some of our games where we just loan the assets out for like a testing period to some of our like vetted and very active community to just try the game, and whatever they earn in that game, they're welcome to keep. And then we just want the assets back as we figure out how to actually make a scholarship program or a lending structure out of it. But I think that's very like it's a very different style of like game testing in that idea there, right? Where you'd hire a game tester and you'd pay them, they give you your feedback, and then they're off, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I want to get back to, I was going to talk about a DAO, and I think you had mentioned that Yield Guild is kind of like a hybrid in the sense that it has a DAO, but it also has another like kind of a more of a company structure to it as well. So, I'm just thinking in terms of our DAO at Avagachi and kind of what we're doing. How is the YGG DAO, like what is the YGG DAO structure like? Is it, like how is it set up as an organization? And to what extent do like community members participate in DAO governance?
I'm actually going to say it's fairly similar to Avangacci, right? So Avangacci is Pixelcraft Studios, right? Pixelcraft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, Avagachi and then Pixelcraft is like the developer, yeah, of Avagachi. They're like their own like entity.
Exactly. So you can kind of see us as like, um, there's two facets to YGG. Like, there's the developer side, which would be like Pixelcraft. In our case, we just call them core members. And then we have like a community side too of Avangacci, which is our DAO base. It's not as flushed out as Avangacci in the sense where like we have way more of the community, voting on proposals. We do have that, but it's not as like it's not ridiculously key decisions specifically pertaining to like do you think this game we should invest in it, right? Like or that kind of thing there. Just because again it would take so long with our pipeline of games, like we would literally be doing like 5 or 10 proposals a day. And I don't know how much activity we would get there. So the way we've kind of been doing it right now is, so we actually have multiple different sub-DAOs split off from YGG. So we have regional sub-DAOs, which is again split off into region-specific areas, because again we realize as YGG that we can't cover every demographic or culture, super thoroughly as one single entity. So being able to have like these regionally run sub guilds that are again run by people from that region generally allows us to kind of tailor our attack or like how we get these assets out to people in those regions. And then on the other end of it, which I'm more involved with is gaming sub DAOs. So that's where we actually take YGG's assets within a specific game and then tokenize it. And essentially that sub DAO and that token goes to our active players or scholars that are playing that game to give them more stake and share in what we do and how we use those assets in game. So like a perfect example of this is, I'm not sure if you've heard of League of Kingdoms. It's very similar to Clash of Clans.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, so we're partnered with them. We bought like 265 plots in their initial sale of land for our players to play on there, and we saw kind of an opportunity there where our players were asking us if we were going to buy more land or if they should buy their own land or whatnot. But we were already collectively kind of helping each other by working on the land that YGG had bought, which is how you generate revenue in that game. So I had proposed the idea of actually splitting this off into its own sub-DAO, where we would essentially tokenize that land. So for every plot, there would be 1,000 tokens of governance token. So 265,000 tokens in general for that sub-DAO. And then those tokens would be initially sold to the active community members that were playing the game before we release that to public. And essentially they could buy a chunk of YGG land or at least own a stake in it. And then again, they were free to do what they please with that. They could sell their token if it went up in value or sell it. But the main key for there was it allowed them to vote in in our governance now specifically for that sub-DAO. So in that game, if we're looking at more land, instead of the revenue directly going back to YGG, it stays within that sub-DAO treasury for the sub-DAO participants, i.e. the token holders, to decide what that revenue is used for now.
Wow, that's really cool. And that's kind of allocating value to the right people from the start. Because you said, I might have missed it, but I think you said once this land gets tokenized, this YGG land, active players in the game are the ones who first get rewarded with this token. Is that right?
Yeah, so we originally did it as like token sales. So they would get, if the price of our land had ballooned to like 1 million and we made like a $50,000 investment, we would then take like 30% or some huge amount off the value of those initial owners. So they still have to buy tokens, but it might be at a 50 to 70% valuation reduction just for them, because they helped us build that, right? So they should get a reduction in the overall value if the assets have gone up. So we had that there. Like I said, the future of work thing kind of ties into that token distribution going down the road and how YGG wants to get those tokens out to people, because it would be great if we could like airdrop or do other things like that. But also we've seen like airdrops sometimes, doesn't actually go directly to the community people in a big net like that.
That is so cool, man. I love the idea of a sub-DAO because it helps keep your kind of coordination there, and also the level of organization still stays very high. Because you see it all the time in these ecosystems where a DApp or it could be a project just gets too large, and they start to lose kind of control over their protocol, or they lose control over their community because they have too much. It's too fragmented, and there's not much organization there. So I think it's really cool what you're doing with sub DAOs, and then also having the regional aspect probably means that these people probably physically can meet up and relationships and get to know each other kind of even on a deeper level. So there's like a social aspect I see there too.
Oh, by far, yeah. We actually just held our YGG Axie managers meet in Manila, PH there. So a lot of our managers who had never met before, they got to come out essentially and hang out with our founders, Gabby and Barrel and Owl or whatnot. And it was kind of, again, we put that on there not only as a social aspect to get these managers to, meet in person and finally do that, but also as a like kind of a thank you, right? Like these are the people running the scholarships, helping us, manage 20,000 scholars and allowing them to earn as well, right? Like the least we can do is put on an event to show our appreciation and help make those connections even stronger, right?
That's so cool. I mean, I can't wait till I meet up with all the other Avogacci ambassadors, and that's going to happen soon, I hope. So I think that will, it does deepen the connection, increases the coordination in between managers. So that's really cool to see. But going back to like the tokenized land, since we're talking about tokenized land and tokens and incentivizing players, you actually have like another YGG token, like aside from this token. Is that right?
Yeah, so sub-DAO tokens.
Okay.
So this would be like YGG LOK. We also have one for Splinterlands as well. Um, and then all the regional sub-DAOs have their own tokens and they deal with their own sales and whatnot, right? Like the regional sub-DAOs are allowed to buy their own assets and partner with their own games and vet their own games. Um, like it's very autonomous from YGG, right? YGG kind of helps set up the structure, seed it, and then allows these regions to really tackle what they find is proper for theirs.
Okay. Because we have, I believe in Avogacci, we have YGG SE, like YGGC, and we also
Exactly,
have
yeah.
Yield Guild. Yeah. Okay. So I guess,
Yeah, so
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, they've probably decided to make their own investment into Avangacci because this is kind of where it gets a little tricky, right? They actually have to have their own assets to lend out. Like we might allocate some of our assets to them if they just want to try and see if they're going to make an investment. Um, but once they're ready to actually scale up like their lending operations in an area, they have to make their own investment, right? Through and decide it through their DAO and their leadership to go through with that.
That's really cool. I mean, I'm just thinking about all this stuff about we're talking about sub DAOs. It almost reminds me of it's like a DAO, but like also like a franchise. Like, if you have like a vetted community, that's going to be functional and have proven themselves over time, then it kind of forms this little DAO and then eventually gets recognized as like an official
Exactly.
DAO.
Yeah. I always like I've always made that analogy as well, but I get pushback sometimes from the team because they're like, this sounds very corporate, and people are gonna get, they're gonna associate it with like fast food and all of this kind of stuff or whatnot, or corporate America, and I'm like, yes and no. Like that's the idea. Franchises serve their own purpose, right? It's big conglomerates allowing mom and pop shops to be able to get a portion of the pie, right, a lot quicker, and they deal with all the big overhead stuff that if you're just starting up a business or something like that would be huge overhead and costs to them instead of just hitting the ground running. Okay, you know, Subway or McDonald's takes care of the real estate, all the advertising, all of the structures or whatnot, and essentially you just have to run the store, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's like kind of like empowering people with the toolkit. When I refer to the franchise, it's that aspect. It's like giving
exactly.
people,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, we give them
it's
the access to all of the tools that YGG has made, whether it's bots, some of our profiles on games that we've already researched so they can make their own investments based off of our research and their own independent stuff. And then, like I said, as we roll out some of these more larger things like future of work and all of that, again, I'm sure they're going to be using the tools and stuff that we're creating to create their own version of future of work and implement that to their sub DAO.
That's so cool. And I think that's going to lay a lot of ground for other guilds in Avagachi as they scale. We have a bunch of smaller guilds right now, a lot of smaller organic, like native Avagachi guilds. But as they scale, it's going to be challenging, and maybe that's one way they can approach it as fragmenting their DAO, their large DAO, into smaller sub DAOs, maybe categorized in terms of like a region or something, right? That would be really cool.
Yeah, we've even like I've talked about it with a few like other games. Like I'm not sure if you've heard of War Riders. It's very similar to like Heavy Metal if you've ever played that back in the day with like cars with
Okay.
guns.
Yeah.
So we have one of our core team is like really into that game. I've played it. It's not bad, but it was lacking in a few areas. It's very unique in that sense. Like nobody's really tried that route. You know, I have not seen a heavy metal style game for a long time, so that was a breath of fresh air. Um, but again, like that game, you can't go in there as a solo player because there's already so many large guilds that control the map there. Um, that people aren't, you know, as an individual, you don't stand a chance. You can't really earn,
Yeah.
right? You gotta join one of these alliances or these guilds to be able to even, you know, stand a chance of making earnings. Which is it's an interesting, you know, perspective on economy there. Like it's a very, very, you know, PvP based economy. Um, but what I was getting at there with like the sub DAOs or having multiple different guilds is like, so let's say for Avangotchi, like there's a bunch of these small guilds here and maybe they don't have a lot of land themselves. Maybe YGG tokenizes that land and some of those you know, smaller guilds buy the token to essentially say, hey, you know, we want to build on YGG land. This is us showing that we're, you know, essentially investing a stake into YGG land, and put up a proposal to say, hey, you know, this is our part of the YGG land that we're going to tend to. Um, and then, you know, they don't have to buy the land, but maybe they'll get revenue structure and access to the future of work program that YGG has as well. So that's interesting to think about.
Oh wow, that would be really cool. I mean, that would give them a little bit of a jump start, especially with lacking the capital, but also having the manpower and the time and the coordination to harvest resources. So it's like they have one thing, but they don't have the other thing. And then you guys, you could always use more help, maybe farming lands and creating revenue for your guild also. And so that's
Ex-
kind of a mutually beneficial thing.
exactly. And that way, like, those guilds would essentially operate under the YGG umbrella, but they're still autonomous to continue their operations like they usually do. And then again, you know, if they increase their stake in the sub DAO, then they just have more voting power to you know, decide on what happens, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's really cool. I can't wait to see this kind of unfold in the Gotchiverse because I know it's going to happen. With this what you just explained. So in Avagachi and maybe other games as well, uh, there's many different kinds of assets. There's wearables. There's, like you said, land. There are gotchis. What are what's your thought process as a guild on what assets you decide to buy for the guild? Like for example, with Avagachi, our game specifically, you'll be able to farm on your land, but then you also have like rarity farming competitions where you dress up your Avagachi with like the rarest wearables, and then you're farming ghost. Like, what are some of the things that you were thinking about as a guild when approaching
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So when we think about like our investments, whether it's land or like breedable players, a lot of games split that up economies wise, right? Like you usually have this player token, which in this case is the Avangacci, and then you have like a land parcel, which then produces a bunch of different assets or whatnot. So when we're doing our investment rounds or investment teams looking at that, they're looking at the longevity of this economy and how it lends to us being able to scale up as more players come in collectively and play, and also that as we scale up or as this game scales up, that the economy is going to stay relatively stable, right? Like, well, we're going to have hype cycles and small downturns, but again, stays relatively stable. So that our assets are appreciating, but mainly that our assets are continually working, and that people are able to use them if they don't want to go buy them themselves.
That's awesome. So it's this kind of a balancing act, I guess, that has to happen in terms of like what yield you're expecting over the long term, over the life of the game. Because I mean, if you see the game's going to last 20 years or 30 years, like it's a very long-term vision, then your investment allocation might be very different from the start compared to like a game that you might not see lasting that long. Then maybe you're investing on something that'll harvest the most yield in the shortest time, kind of thing.
Yeah, surprisingly, like we really don't do any short-term like harvesting of stuff. In that regards, when we're looking at investments, we're looking at games that are going to be here for the long run. By far, like we're not. It's very far away from like traditional VC capital where you're only looking to make your investors money, right? Like that is not our purpose here. We're willing to take a little bit of the loss there if it means bringing more players in or it allows our community to share more of the upside. And like a perfect example of that is our scholarship system for Axie. Like we brought in 25.8 million SLP in November of last year, which is, a huge amount there. But out of that, 25.8 million, our scholars got 11.7 out of it. And then again, our managers got a small cut, and YGG itself only ended up taking like 1.3 million in SLP. So like, if you look at that number there, YGG is really only taking enough to kind of make a small profit as well as continue to grow our scholarship, right? Like we use that SLP earnings directly to reinvest to breed more Axies, which means more scholarships for players, right?
Yeah, it's like kind of reinvesting profits in there to grow the guild, but ultimately it's to benefit players, and you want to get people in the door and start mentorships and really create this like a deeper connection between yourselves and these players who maybe have no idea how a Web3 game works. They just heard they can earn some money, like you were saying earlier, and that's really
Exactly.
cool. It's like it's a very benevolent act, if you ask me.
Yeah, some people would see it that way. I really just see it as being fair. Like that's
Yeah.
to me this is what, proper, like I call it social capitalism should be, right? Where it's, yes,
Mhm.
YGG is making some money, there's always going to be the initial investor obviously should make a higher return than the person just you know, doing the work in a sense, but at the same time it shouldn't be totally skewed where the person doing the work is also not earning, not just enough to live, but a good earnings, right? Um, so
That's
that's how I really see it.
mhm. No, that's actually a great point. I'm just thinking about these Alchemica splits that people are going to be doing over the next couple of weeks once this rental program gets rolled out. And it's like we're going to see a whole range of proposals of offers that are up on the table. You might have someone saying, well, you can keep all the Alchemica you want, but then you just pay me 2 ghost a day or something. And then you might have a player who says, well, I'll rent you my Avogachis out, all of them, or anyone you want. And you can keep all the, you can keep all your ghosts or whatever. We'll just take half the Alchemica. You know, there's going to be different proposals that people have, and it'll be interesting to see what's most appealing to this new player that's going to come into the game.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny because again, just like in normal economics, like, the consumer ends up being the one that decides the proper, like, split or what's fair in a large degree. For a long time, like Axie operated for like 50, 50-50. So 50 to the scholar, 50 to not YGD, to whoever was providing the scholarship. But collectively, a lot of the big guilds like YGG said, this is unsustainable. This is definitely not fair to the scholar if you looked at, revenues and how much stuff was going back and forth. For a lot of smaller scholarships or people that were starting up scholarships, I can understand a 50-50 split because, again, you're not at the same size. But any of the other large scholarships, we kind of there's this kind of written agreement where, you know, if you're taking any more than 25% from your scholar, you're being a bit greedy.
Okay, that makes sense because you want to compensate them for their work at the end of the day, and that's really important.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, right, you also don't want to be, you know, not getting any return either, right? Like there's both sides, I think, would agree that they both want fair value for their time and what they're adding to the table, right? Like that's just basic human nature.
Yeah, I could really appreciate that perspective. You know, and like you said, the market will always decide what's the most favorable option. So we have some healthy competition that's probably going to happen to kind of find out what is fair for Alchemica splits. You know,
Exactly, and I'm sure you guys are you're gonna see somebody that's like hustling their Gotchis, and you know people renting aren't making anything, and I'm sure you know the other Gotchi owners would say no, this is wrong. You know you are
hmm
extorting people, right? Like that's sweatshop
yeah,
labor, right? Which is one of the big arguments that at least for YGG we've got a lot of oh you're extorting these people um, to essentially do sweatshop labor, and then you're taking that money back, which is you know as I can preach as much as I want, but the numbers are what speak, right? Like we only take, you know, by the time it's done, less than 10% of that's total 100%, right? With more than 75% going to the scholar, and then another 10 or 15% going to the manager, right? Who might have been a scholar at one point. Um, so YGD takes very little, like because of that philosophy there. We do not want to be a sweatshop, the video game, the metaverse sweatshop, right? We do not want to be that.
yeah, 100%. I mean, we're here to set a new precedent for the future of work, and it definitely shouldn't be based on old ways that people have been extorted and taken advantage of, for sure.
Especially exactly when there's, you know, more of enough money to go around for everybody to live comfortably, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it seems like the priority is to actually create a healthy, sustainable economy because, you know, ultimately the goal is longevity. You know, if YGG is around for 20 years, even if they're taking a 10% cut, that's still a large profit for YGG. Not to mention the scaling and the growth that they're going to see from that because the appeal of, you know, I rent this thing that I didn't pay for, but I keep 75% of the profit is a huge value proposition for someone.
Exactly. And then like my favorite thing is we have and we've built more on ramps for people, so we don't want people to stay scholars forever. Like we that to us actually is not a successful scholarship. We want people to graduate. So um, we hope that people, if they can, right? Obviously, if that's 75% is paying your bills and you need to pay your bills, I'm not going to tell you to go hungry, just so you can eventually buy your own Axie team. But if you can, like, save some of the SLP that you earn, and then when you have X amount of SLP, we will gladly cash out your scholarship team. Because that's the other thing too. If you're a scholar and you spent all this time building up your team, or like your Gotchi, right? And then okay, I have enough to buy one, but now I have to go buy one that's not leveled up or doesn't, you know, have the same sentimental value, I guess you could say, because you do
Right.
build the relationship with these assets, right? This team or this Gotchi that you've
Oh yeah.
spent months training or petting, right? Um, a lot of people when they graduate, they don't. Yes, they have enough money to go buy a team, but they would still want their team. So we kind of we're able to bridge that gap where we will essentially just give them their private keys back, or send those Axies to another wallet depending, um, and then you know subsidize their team based on SLP, and usually we'll give them a discount too on top of that. Um, so it's and then they graduate and maybe they join our esports program, right? Where they battle in Axie tournaments, right? Like there's the idea is to have these on ramps off of where you're not just working for YGG forever. Like there is a way eventually, you know, you graduated to, you know, a non-scholar within YGG, and maybe you become a scholar for a different game or something like that in the future. But like, we do not want you to stay there forever. Like the idea is to learn how these assets work, make a little bit of money, and then maybe you want to buy your own assets and still be a part of the YGG ecosystem and community.
Wow, that's really incredible. How like for the player, like how much you're advocating for for the player to have this like ladder almost to come in with nothing, and if they're willing to put in the work, the time, effort, the skill, they're able to actually level up to get their own assets, and then maybe they might accrue enough assets to pay it forward and kind of help someone else. So I kind of see how this kind of goes on and on and on like a cycle.
Exactly. Yep.
That's awesome. I mean, so I have maybe just like one. I have like one more question, and then maybe.
I'm not bad on time, so.
Okay. Okay. Good. 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 Well, then maybe I might have two more questions.
Okay, go for it.
But then also, we might have some questions in here. So if anybody in here has a specific question, uh, feel free to just request to speak, and I'll definitely get you up here, and you can definitely ask some questions. Questions are great. So.
100%.
So we have these communal events in Gotchi, these ceremonial kind of channeling events where guilds will get together with their guildmates. They might have they need to have the same wearable, and then they're going to channel and get this like Gotchi UBI, essentially free alchemica that gets given to them essentially from thin air. I mean, it's from an allocated budget, but it's there for people to get. One of the things I've been wondering is what are some of the challenges that people might face when coordinating large groups of people in the metaverse?
Lots of challenges, to say the least there. You have the challenges of education, as we're talking about, right? Like a lot of people aren't familiar with wallets and certain things in that regard there. We've also had, surprisingly, some issues with just like Discord or whatnot there. Surprisingly, a lot of people from the Philippines, they really understand Facebook, but have never actually dealt with Discord before. That's obviously changed quite a bit. But that's always interesting to try and walk people through, like just how to get into one of the specific Discord channels or claim a role. So there's lots of challenges there. I think a lot of the tooling has started to be done. But just, even just like in the real world, it's still hard to coordinate people because you can plan as much as you want, but people tend to steer that plan in different directions, or things come up where you have to work around it to keep your plan going, right?
Yeah, 100%. Those are some really good things to kind of consider, especially that point you made about people not having something like a Discord. Like that's something I didn't even think about. But it would definitely make the process a lot more complicated, being that Discord is like it's like our primary means of communication.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think like our scholars are really like generally young people, but surprisingly, like we did a documentary like way back in the Philippines there, and there was a couple that was they own a store in the Philippines, but because of obviously the tourism and COVID, they couldn't run their store, so their income dried up. But they were like, there's 65-year-old couple there, and we ended up being, their revenue stream, right? But again, for them, they've never heard of Discord, right? They've never heard of that before. So like we found that we've actually had to walk people through joining and claiming roles. And on top of that, our Discord is really intimidating because we have so many sub-channels within there for pretty much every game that we have, that, I can imagine for somebody that's never been in Discord to join a Discord and then see a Discord with like 500 chat rooms, to be very intimidating. Like, where do you start, right? And we've tried our best with guides and whatnot, but again, it's not the same as being there holding somebody's hand to teach them.
Yeah, that guidance is probably really important, especially for someone who's not from that generation that we would think about as a gamer. Maybe they're like in their early teens to like late 30s or whatever. That's what usually comes to my mind when I'm thinking about, these play to earn games and crypto and all this stuff. But no, it's actually people who are using it as a means of like actually earning, and that kind of was a priority for them. But then also the game was maybe interesting, or it was fun to play, like you're saying. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, for them, they love the game. They had nothing else to do. There were a couple that did it together, and that's awesome. The fact that you can do that with your wife or whatnot, you can end up earning. You enjoy the game, right? Um, and then they love the sense of community. Like that was their big thing too. Once they finally got around, like learning Discord, they love to chat, right? They love to, because that's the thing. You really don't know what the age of somebody is, in the Discord unless they've explicitly told you. And you probably would have never known that you were talking to like the 65-year-old man from the Philippines that loves Axie as much as you do, right?
I mean, that's so incredible. It's like, as unfortunate as these experiences were, as chaotic and unfortunate as these experiences were, it really did exemplify this future of work and what it could be, possibly.
Exactly, yeah. For a lot of like developing or partially developed countries, like this has been huge. Like we have a lot of stuff that deals with Latin America, like Venezuela and Brazil, and we've gotten a lot of flack for certain things here, especially with SLP going up and down, and the whole idea of like sweatshops or whatnot. Um, and that's why I'm so adamant about saying like, no, that's not the case. We're very, scholar community member first. But I understand why like people are skeptical is because of that same idea. Like we've taken advantage of these countries, these people based on our economic status throughout the world. And, we have a lot of people championing that, there needs to be something done. I see future of work. I see Web3 as one of those things that can truly change and balance the world economy essentially for everybody, right? Like, why should somebody playing video games here in the States technically make more money than somebody in the Philippines? Well, that's only because we have esports programs here, right? Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And it really opens up the pool for possible good players because right now we have esports tournaments in the US and that's a small fraction of the world in terms of gamers. I wouldn't say a small fraction, but it's a fraction of the world of gamers. And so there might be some really incredibly skilled and talented people who are just not in this pool, right? They just don't get exposed to it. They don't get the opportunity.
Exactly. And the problem right now with esports, like, is it's again, sports has to be competitive, right? But what about those people that are, farmers? What about those people that are just specifically content creators for games, right? Like, we need to be broader in the sense of what gets rewarded with value instead of just specifically, great PvP play.
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely many, many things to consider. So for my last question I have for you, so we talked about a few different games that you touched on, and you have players spread across all these different games.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see, as we go on into this like future of work and more people getting into this from mainstream, do you see a lot of migration happening between these games as players want to try new ones, or is it more of like an expansion, kind of like a new game launches and then more people from the outside get drawn into the YGG, what they're doing?
I think there's going to be a very good mixture of both. Right? Like we want to bring in communities. That's one of the reasons why I've been so, happy to come and chat to the Gotchi team and whatnot here in the community there is like, I want to get the word for YGG out there and that, we are building these different things. And, it's great that we have a large library where people can kind of figure out what game suits them, what game is fun and has earning potential and they want to stay in there. And then if another game comes out that they're interested in, yeah, they can, play that other game as well as the game they're currently in. Or again, it's very fluid, right? We want to bring people from outside the community in, but we also want to give community members that might be interested the opportunity as well. Hope I explained that right.
No, you did. Yeah, totally. I mean, there has to be an on-ramp for people, again, like what we talked about earlier, that have no idea what this stuff is, but they have an interest to play and have some room left for them. But at the same time, also realize that there might be some people that want to hop in between Axie and Avagachi and maybe have a certain, it sounds like, allocation for those players.
Exactly. And we also understand, like, you can play games for a long time and then all of a sudden your opinion changes, right? Like it just gets boring, or, you're just not interested anymore. Like, again, like I said, I don't want it to be like, oh, you're working, you have to work, you can never leave or go try another game, right? Like that's not the point here. You might forfeit your future work allocation if it's during the season or something, but like that's totally your discretion. You don't have a boss or anything else like actually telling you have to. It's your sole discretion on how you want to do it.
That's really cool. I mean, it's a new level of freedom in terms of what people can choose to participate in.
Exactly. And I think, we've heard this idea of like universal basic income quite a bit. And I actually don't think we'll ever get a very good government version of universal basic income, just with all the intricacies and, it's very hard to do. I kind of like what one of our articles had stated before, which is we call this universal creative income, because essentially when you're playing a game, you're creating value regardless of what you're doing within that game. Right? You're just creating value out of it there. And I think that's a much broader term there, because it's not saying, well, we're just going to give you everything for free, right? Just because you're a citizen. You still have to be, actively involved within the community, doing something, playing the game, doing something there. So it's not just a handout. Like you still have to do something. Nothing comes from, just doing nothing. Like there has to be a give and a take, just like work, right? Like you're providing a service, your boss is going to sell that service or whatever, and then give you part of the money back. Like that's how the economy works in a sense, right? Even when we were bartering way back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, I would even say it's like a core tenet of like the original crypto, which is Bitcoin. There had to be proof of work, or there's no Bitcoin. So
exactly, nothing is just for free. We can't just print money out of the thin air like that. That actually dilutes the value of real work, right? So it's very interesting to see. And it was funny because I'm not sure if you're familiar with Andrew Yang, who was one of the, I think he was presidential candidates. So we actually, he's spun up a DAO now called Lobby 3 DAO, I think, which is specifically aiming to like target legislature and essentially the United States there, like to get them informed on Web3 and what it actually can benefit them in terms. So our founder actually got invited to go sit on with Andrew, and there's probably a podcast if you sift through the YGG Twitter there, where our founder is talking with Andrew Yang, who's a huge proponent of universal basic income, and now he's coming towards Web3, and he's come to YGG to kind of, figure out how we could help each other kind of implement these things. And I just thought that's like mind-boggling, right? That, a presidential candidate is coming to talk to our founders about something that we're building here, right?
Wow, that's amazing. I did not know that. So you actually have Andrew Yang, or who's somewhat has been involved with kind of helping provide at least some sort of an opinion on what this all is. That's so amazing.
Yeah, on Capitol Hill, right? Like in front of senators, and again, like we need to be in front of them. Like this idea that crypto doesn't need government and government doesn't need crypto is silly. Like there's going to be a hybrid system. There's no extreme to one end of just crypto and one end of no government, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I think the future is going to be somewhere in the middle, where both parties are getting what they need out of it, and there's a general consensus that it's good, at that point.
Exactly.
It's gonna be a long road to get there, I think, but I think we definitely have the right momentum, right, with everything that we're doing, with everything that YGG is doing, which is like, I think it's amazing that you guys have dipped your toe into so many different games and not get caught in that confirmation bias of like, this is the game, like this is gonna be the only game, and you've actually gone and probably tested so many games, but then also have established yourself in so many games. So really, really happy to see that happening.
Yeah, and we've helped a few other like smaller guilds themselves start up as well, like Loot Squad and a few of those other ones there. So this is the whole thing is like we're not also trying to monopolize all of Web3. Like we think competition's healthy in a sense, and I don't really even consider it competition, right? Like well, I've even said if our wait list for our scholars is too long and somebody has an opening in their scholarship outside of YGG, like go take it. Um, it's a very open and inclusive space where there's like it's healthy competition. We all want to be successful, but at the same time, it's not like, well, I'm not gonna let this possible scholar um, not have a scholarship because I want to be greedy and I only want him to be a scholar for YGG.
Right. Okay. All right. So I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the Gotchiverse. I'm curious to know how many Avogotchis you guys currently have right now in your collection.
I actually had somebody pull me up that number, so let me just find the DM there from our portfolio guy who does all of that. I always ask him to find these things for me.
Yeah, right on. If anybody else is in here right now that has some questions or even some comments, like you want to share something, definitely just give me a request and I'll get you up here on stage. It's always good to hear your guys' opinions as well, being that everybody in here, I think right now is, from what I recognize, is a pretty involved in the Avogotchi community.
Yeah, don't be scared. I like questions.
I have one for you, Bill. How much you find your stat first?
What was that?
I have a question, but I'm going to let him find his stat first.
Yeah, right on. Yeah.
As I scroll through all of these messages here between. Okay, so we have 83 Realm NFTs, 23 Gotchis, and 199 wearables, and probably just under 200,000 ghosts.
That is a very nice kind of distribution. It goes back to our conversation we were having earlier on how you guys kind of decide to allocate everything, and it makes sense. You didn't go all in on one thing. You have a nicely balanced. I like how you actually allocated a decent amount to wearables as well, because I think the wearables are going to have this huge like gating function over time that it's going to really play into a lot of the lore and the quests and all these like really really kind of special things you'll be able to do in the Gotchiverse. I think will be related to these wearables. So
yeah.
I'm glad you have that.
Yeah, our investment team is really good at working with the developers to like kind of figure out, again, their vision too on where their economy is going to go. And then we tailor our investment to that, right? Like when we're investing into something, it's we're not just looking to make money. Like we're really truly looking to help these games and these investment partners, be in it for 5-10 years at least, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. That makes sense. I'd like to open up the room. I know, Mike Callum, you're saying you had a question.
For sure. So this is just me with expansionist type thoughts. You guys sound like a players first guild for sure. I'm pretty impressed with the rates of the share. It's much more generous than I was anticipating, honestly. And so I'm wondering, do you guys see any kind of framework or future where YGG would give someone like me the opportunity to invest in like key and top players themselves as like athletes within the digital sports community and the digital realm communities?
Like esports related stuff? So yeah, we actually do have like a department dedicated to esports and somebody that heads that up there. We have been very generous with tournaments for Axes for some of our top players. In terms of that, again, and they're not scholars, right? These are specific people that have esports teams that they've bought and that they play with. The only caveat to that is sometimes when the meta shifts, these guys don't want to go out and buy new Axes to be competitive, and we might supply them with some of our own very competitive Axes just to offset that so that they can still be competitive for the season. In terms of like community stuff, so actually this brings up a really good thing that I can put out there. Like we want other people that are ambassadors or whatnot for other games to feel like they can come and contribute to our community as well and help both. move forward. So what I've done and kind of how we work here on Game Ops is I have league game ambassadors and game ambassadors. So league game ambassadors are essentially there are community members that are really passionate specifically about a game and have good knowledge on it. As Game Ops manager here, I can only obviously retain so much data about all of these various games, and as we scale up more, that's only going to get harder and harder. And that's actually not very good. Like, I should not be the one making decisions directly on a game if I don't know what the game's about, right? Like, that's how bad planning comes about. So the idea there is we have these game ambassadors that essentially fill out reports and then feedback information to me about some of the things or blockers that they need that YGG can solve, or how YGG should allocate these assets based on the information that they know for the games, right? So again, I could really see maybe one of you guys from having Gotchi coming over here and helping our lead GA, who is Emil, kind of tailor YGG's strategy going forward with having Gotchi.
That's really cool that you even have an opportunity for people who just have a nice knowledge base and are already leading parts of the project. And it's like, hey, come spread some of that expertise over here, help us grow. And then there's there's a way to kind of deliver value both ways. That's really cool.
Yeah. And eventually, like I said, those roles will probably be, they'll end up being compensated through the future of work thing. Which is the whole point, right? Again, they're providing very important value and essentially leadership of this game that they should, be earning a part of our governance token as, value for their time and their effort to grow it for YGG.
I love that. There's definitely some exploring I'm gonna have to do myself. So yeah, it's I'm glad that was brought up. Thanks for asking that, Michael. And so on that note, if there are any other questions, we can still take them right now. But I'd really like to just really thank you for taking the time today to share this conversation with us. I think it's been really valuable. It's given me some things that I can chew on now going into Aavegotchi. And it's actually it's perfect timing because the Aavegotchi realm will officially be launching March 31st. Mm-hmm. So it'll be really cool to see some of these things you're talking about kind of play out in the Gotchiverse live in action. We have Dr. Wagme coming up here. Hey, Dr. Wagme, how's it going? Yeah, Dr. Wagme's... Yeah, there we go. Hey, Dr. Wagme.
Hey, guys. Hey, thank you, Fallon, for being here. I really appreciate what YGG is doing for the space. I enjoyed being a part of the call recently with Andrew Yang, and I'm just really excited to see what you guys bring to Aavegotchi. So just wanted to shout out to you guys. You guys are providing so much value and really pioneering the space of what guilds can do. And in my current role, I interface with a lot of different guilds. I've worked with Blackpool and CGU a lot, and I'm just consistently impressed by the ethos of YGG and YGGC. So thank you for that. You guys are doing great.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I really do. We're actually partnered with Blackpool as well. So that's why I was saying, like, we work, we're not overly competitive with the other guilds that are within the space either.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I did send you a DM, just a shout out with potential opportunities if you guys do need more assets or more gotchis. So check that out, and I'm free anytime, but thank you for being here.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. I really look forward to hopefully being able to, like I said, maybe have a YGG Gotchi sub-DAO in the future where, hopefully all of you guys that are huge community members for Gotchi maybe, help us shepherd that as well, right?
100%.
So yeah, no, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to come and chat. Like I said, I don't do this often, so it's great to be able to make that connection here, and hopefully I see some of you guys in the YGG Discord. I always lurk in the Gotchi Discord. You just won't see me there like on the side, but I am lurking.
That's awesome. And I think we should definitely, once the realm is launched and we see some of this stuff in action, I know we have another Avagotchi ambassador who really likes to do this kind of stuff. He calls his series Guilds of the Gotchiverse, and it'd be cool to kind of meet up again on there sometime and kind of get an update on some of this stuff that we talked about here today before launch and get a post launch kind of update would be really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, my door is open. Just send me a DM there, and as long as it's like a week or two before, I can definitely pencil you guys in.
Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you sharing all this insight with us. It's going to be really valuable information to share with other guilds, and you know, to even have this opportunity to collaborate with you that's awesome. So yeah, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you for being such a great host there. And like I said, we'll do this more often. And once that land and stuff comes out, I'm sure, you know, YGG and Avangotchi will be doing quite a bit together. So I hope to see all of you guys in like at least our counts or in our chats helping us actually direct it, because again, you guys are going to be the people that know more than me when it comes to Avangotchi. So
Yeah, very cool. And yeah, thank you for all the listeners who joined in today as well. So yeah, appreciate you guys showing up. I think they got a lot of value out of it too, so it works both ways. And yeah, we'll talk again and we'll keep in touch.
for sure, we're all going to make it, guys.
Exactly. We're all gonna make it. I love it. Yeah.
Okay.
Take care, friends.
Take care, friends. Ciao.